Freedom fighters, I'm coming back at you with another one. I'm gonna do something a little different today. I watch Shawn Ryan's show here and there. I've talked about him occasionally, different episodes I've watched, stories that he's broken. He's done some good work, and other stuff is a little questionable. I know he broke open that Tesla bomber story and a couple other ones. He's had, we talked about the controversy of having Hunter Biden on, and, a lot of these leftists and stuff like this, he kind of cozies up to and everything. But anyway, so I was just, had YouTube on the backdrop and it was playing videos. And after a video ended, one of his episodes popped up that I haven't seen before. Now, this episode is called A Police Officer Goes to War with His Dad's Drug Dealer. And I don't know if you guys saw this. And if you want to go check it out before you hear my commentary on it or anything, I recommend it that you hear it straight from the source himself. I'm not going to be able to play the clips as, I probably always get copyright striked and all that. And I'm pretty much just going to go over it because I don't even have the time anymore to do all the editing and stuff like that. But let's get to it. So, I have a couple notes here. It says, all I got from this was the guy's name is Blake. I don't have his full name or his full story and everything like that. We'll get into that later. But, so anyway, he says it starts out with, his dad was a long time drug addict, and he said he's always been waiting for the call that his dad was dead. Well, he finally gets a call one day midway. I think he was in training or police school or something at the academy, and he goes, is he dead? And they go, no, he's alive, but he's really sick with his stepmom or something like that. Messaged that he was so bad off, she was worried that she called the cops. And right off the bat, he goes, these cops here where I'm from don't know how to beat cops, and says, like they're the worst cops. Which we're going to talk more in about that, and which you already know we've covered that multiple times. But anyway, so he goes home and says, now that he's in the hospital, he gets a call from the doctor and says, yeah, it's really bad and all this stuff. And he said that, he's OD'd before and all this stuff. And he says, he was so bad off, or that he was just like laying around and everything, that his heart actually started molding over. So they said they had to remove mold from his heart and all this other stuff. And Blake ends up talking to his wife and says, I'm financially able to help him. I can take the time off, all this stuff. I have the availability to help this guy. I'm going to go help my dad. So he goes over there, and he says as soon as he walks in the house, he's been into, a bunch of trap houses, a bunch of drug dens previously. And he goes in there and says, this is the worst one, right? And he said the smell just about knocked him out. And if you've ever been in them, you know what he's talking about. And he says, yeah, there's, needles everywhere and, trash everywhere. The dishes are piled up, everything like that. And like I said, if you've ever been into one of these houses, you know how it is. There is zero cleanliness or order or anything to any of that. So he calls up one of his buddies and says that, he's in town, and the guy helps him out, and they end up stripping the place up, cleaning all this stuff up, cleaning the house, fixing it up, and they clean it out. And he talks to his dad, or maybe this was previous, but he got the okay from his dad. He basically said, look, you're going to be dead. You need to get sober. I'm going to pay for, your help, get you into a rehab, all this stuff. We're going to clean up your home, do all this stuff. And he agrees for that while he's in the hospital. And so then they go about doing the cleaning and everything like that. Well, then he gets back and basically starts all over again, right? And goes through the whole thing. Well, at this point, he's like, I'm gonna, figure out who he's dealing with. I can't remember if he said, I think he said he found his, um, like book or something, and maybe his dad was dealing himself. I can't remember exactly what it was, or maybe it was his stepmother or something. But somehow he realized his contacts and went through it, and he found out who his drug dealer or supplier was. And then he goes and tracks him down, um, finds out all this stuff and basically lays out a whole case. He's like, okay, this is who it is. I followed them around town. I see people who they're dropping off to, all this stuff. And then he gives it to the police. And they basically say, oh, there's nothing we can do about it. And they basically just blow it off. And he's like, I don't understand. Like, I just did your guy's job. Like, I laid the whole case. This so and so and is a drug dealer. They're supplying this to the town. They're doing this, and the cops don't seem the least bit interested and say, oh, there's nothing we can do with it. So at the end of the day, he calls his dad, telling him all this stuff. And the short story of it, him and that drug dealer concocted a plan and said, his dad turned on him and was like, you're a piece of shit. And we're going to say, I forget exactly what he said, that maybe that they fought or something, like he hit him or something like that. Short story, he's going to get a DV, a domestic violence charge. And I think that lady, that the drug dealer or whatever that he was tracking and you building the case on, said, he was stalking her and all this stuff, and it was basically going to place a red flag on him. So he was going to get the DV or this red flag, and he talks about how this was going to derail his career, how he was done. He was like, this is worse than being a convicted felon. He's like, this is essentially going to strip me of my title, take my guns, and that's it. And he goes, that's all I've ever known, right? He's like, I've been I can't remember if he's actually a cop. I guess he is. The title of the video is Police Officer Goes to War with a Drug Dealer. But he says he was training. Like, that's what he does. He's like, all I've ever done was run guns and train cops. And this case reminded me a lot of Mike Glover. And I did a video on him. You can go back and watch that. But, it's this position where they don't realize where they're at. And, like Mike Glover was always the preparedness, kind of guy. And this is the point I've always tried to get across on these guys' channels. Is what they're like, prepare for this, prepare for that, civil unrest or civil war, World War III, all this stuff. And what I've always tried to point out to them is the constant amount of people getting their guns taken and unconstitutional laws by the tyrannical and corrupt police system all along. And while they're focusing on preparing for World War III and, going out in the woods and, bushcrafting and all this stuff, the real threat is the corruption. The real threat is the tyrannical police state that on a whim can take your firearms whenever, unconstitutionally, and just do as they please. So as prepared as you are, and all your military training and your police, work and all that, on a whim of fake false allegations and charges, everything can be taken from you, and that's the point I'm pretty sure I was trying to get across in that Mike Glover video. Is like, yeah, you weren't prepared for that, were you? Out of all the things you were trying to prepare for, that was the least in your mindset. And that's always what I've talked about the most. Is, what's the probability of World War III and all, Civil War and all this stuff. But the probability of this other thing, and throughout this whole video, I somehow knew this was going to lead to, it was going to go bad, and it was going to lead to the confiscation of his guns or something like that. And when he first started telling his story of cleaning up his dad's house, the drug den, and how there's needles everywhere, and like drug paraphernalia, pipes, foil, whatever it is, um I was like, that right there. I was waiting for, the cops to walk in and see him and basically, arrest him for possession of all this stuff. And I've seen plenty of cases like that. And I've talked previously about people in my own life, right? I've had family in those situations. I've had plenty of friends that have been, wrapped in that world. And I can no longer associate because I remember reading countless cases where it's like, hey, buddy, can I get a ride? And, your friend hops in the car. And whether it's maliciously or not, a baggie drops out, right? It doesn't matter how little it is. A crumb of heroin, a single pill of oxy, anything like that that's unprescribed and anything. And then later, a couple months down the road, you forget your blinker or something like that. You run a stop sign, you get pulled over, and they're like, hey, what is this pill? Well, that's a felony, instant felony and loss of rights. So you can't take that risk. You can't associate with those people. You can't, try to help them. And that was kind of like the theme I was going on. What do they say? No good deed goes unpunished. And it's like you're just trying to help people, and somehow it can lead to your, um, on disarmament and bad things coming your way, which makes you not want to go out and help people, right? And it's like a vicious a cycle of where it's like you want to help, you want to do good, but you realize the position it can put you in. And that's what he said. He was like, after it was all said and done, which by the way, he goes, that the way he got out of it was like, I guess he talked to the person and was like, you got to drop this and it's all BS and all that. And they said, well, the only way I'm going to drop it is if you write an apology letter and basically cut ties from your dad. So he realized, like, the person who's the drug dealer of the county and almost killed his father, he has to apologize to and basically lose his dad. But then he realized, his dad was gone all along, right? He was already gone. But that's kind of like, the moral of the story I wanted to get to and everything. And it was a pretty interesting story by Shawn Ryan. And like I said, I mean, he's definitely got, a lot of interesting stories and stuff like that. And, he's had these, like I said, these controversial people on recently. And, he's got all these Democrats coming on. I saw the recent one with Ro Khanna. And, look, I agree with Sean in the perspective of, he wants to protect children and he wants to go after the PDF files, which I'm 100% on board with. But people like Ro Khanna are not there for that, right? They see an opening. And see, that's the thing with the right and everything. We hold ours accountable. Like, when we see things we don't like from Donald Trump, we hold his feet to the fire. And all his anti-gun stances and, him kissing the ass of Bibi and Israel and covering up these e-files and the slew of things we've constantly talked about. We hold his feet to the fire. We press him on this and stuff like that. The left doesn't do that to their own, right? And when they see that opening, that divide, they exploit that. So Ro Khanna is not on there because he cares about children. Ro Khanna is not on there for any other reason but to get Donald Trump. And Shawn Ryan, it takes the bait. Same thing with Gavin Newsom and having, him on there. He gives them a gun and he plays kind with them. He never holds these people. He never plays hardball and gets tough with these people and be like, what's up with your open border policy? Why are you replacing Americans and why are you stripping people of their guns? And you're an unconstitutional tyrant and should be held accountable. But he never goes into that. He just lets them give free reign to his large platform and basically gives them legitimacy. And all this stuff that was coming down, I kind of wanted to wrap this up, tie it up with and this guy is a cop, right? And he talks constantly throughout this podcast about how they're not good cops and they're corrupt and this system. And look at the comments in that video. A lot of people from West Virginia, and like I said, I have roots there. I have ties in West Virginia. I've often thought about moving back there. And the people are like, oh no, man, these West Virginia cops are hella corrupt. Oh, I've experienced it firsthand, the corruption, and oh, don't go to this county and don't go to this part of West Virginia because, they're running all kinds of extortion and, the poverty's really bad and, the cops come from up there, so they're also poor and they're willing to take, bribes or, steal your money or do whatever. And it's like, it goes back to a video I just did. Like, there's nowhere to run. Like, you cannot run from this, man. The fight is coming. And then these cops, like this guy Blake, don't realize it. And these are the people they're training, right? And, I recently talked in my last video about, I brought up James Yeager. And he's talked about this before. And he talked about, how he kind of separated from law enforcement and how he saw, a lot of these people not doing good. Reed Hendricks was another one who talked about it. He's like, I don't want to train these cops that are following orders and, depriving people of their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness and unconstitutionally stripping people of their rights and taking guns. Like, I don't want these people on my range. And he's told them, like, guys, if this is what you're about and this is what you're going to be doing, but of course they'll never openly say that, right? They'll just keep their mouth shut and get the training, do the work and then go out there and do it anyway. So, I mean, that's what these people have to realize, man, that the corruption and criminality amongst these police forces and everything, and it goes both ways. Everyone thinks it's always like, oh, it's New York City cops, right? It's all the cities. It's the metropolitan hubs. It's Seattle, Washington. It's, Chicago cops, all these people. Man, it's in every corner, everywhere, right? Corruption knows no bounds, and it's the human condition. I did a video a long time ago I refer to often. It was like, are people inherently good? And, that's why I say we look up to these positions of, police officers, judges, whatever. And it's like they can all be corrupted. They can all be persuaded by greed and, jealousy and anger and, anything that you and I can, suffer for. What a human emotions. A officer can feel the same. A judge can feel the same. And they can rule unjustly. They can be an activist and go against the law and do what they feel and sentence you accordingly to their beliefs, not what the actual law is. Talked about that before, about leftists on the Supreme Courts and mayors and governors who think they have the ability to take away God-given rights. You didn't give the people those rights. And it doesn't matter what you stroke on a pen or what your pen strokes on paper and say, oh, people can no longer possess this. Doesn't matter what you say. You didn't give them that. You don't have the ability to take it away. That's what rights are. And, you know, there's been plenty of these cases where, small crime, uh, this is always my problem I've had. Recently, there was a viral case of the white Mustang girl. I'm pretty sure you saw this. A civil rights lawyer did one on this, and it's this young girl, and I can't remember if it was her Mustang or her dad's Mustang. She's driving around. Um, I forget exactly what she did. Some kind of traffic violation, and maybe speeding or something like that. But I feel like it was something else that happened. And a cop saw her, threw on the lights, and she, kept going and ended up going home. And this happens very often, where people, they're not criminals. They don't have a body in the trunk or anything like that. They're not trying to get away, like fleeing at 100 miles per hour. I think actually I saw a study that said like 80 or 90% of police chases don't go like above 10 mile per hour over the speed limit, because most of the time people just want to go home, right? And that's what she did. She drove home. The cops followed her there and arrested her, a felony arrest for fleeing and eluding. They do this often. And then her cuck dad, they call her dad up and he agrees with the police, because people are in this brainwashed position that the police have to be in the right. And he's telling his daughter, oh, you just screwed up your life. There goes medical school and, this and that. Screw medical school. Immediately I'm thinking is like, this young woman just lost her firearms rights. Do you believe that young woman deserves to never defend herself again in her future family because she didn't throw on her blinker, or she turned on no right on red, or ran a stop sign and then drove home? That's ridiculous. And that's why I talked about constantly about, putting crime to firearm disarmament, right? Felonies in the self nothing can deprive you of your rights. So, all these cases like that. And then, these cops and these military, the gun tubers and the vet bros, always on there talking about, their police worship and, all this stuff. They're never going to do anything, which is what I've always talked about. And, who was the one guy I saw recently? I mean, I've seen so many, but, um, what's that? I saw Andy Frisella, and what's the other guy I'm thinking about? Man, damn, I can't remember his name. I can't even remember if Andy Frisella was a vet. Jocko or Jimmy Dory or something. I can't remember. I don't even watch most of these podcasts anymore. The Reaper, Nicholas Irving, has been on Twitter recently talking about, a proper country would have a revolution by now, right? And they've all been saying, like, with these files and everything, like, what happened to men like that? We're not out here writing, righting these wrongs and correcting this corruption. And, Nicholas Irving has been out there and just being like, questioning. He's like, people aren't ready for a revolution. People ain't about that life. Like, they're not ready for this. And it's like, what about you? And this is what I've talked about in my vet bro videos and my, sheriff and police videos. It's like, bro, I look up to you. We look up to you. We've always been like, like, when are these people going to do something? You have the ability and everything to do this stuff. And the people who could pull the triggers, the people who could right the wrongs, the people we look up to, the respected, positions in the military and stuff like this. They're on Twitter complaining just like we are. And I talked about that with the Trump administration and, Don Jr. and Eric Trump and Stephen Miller and people in his cabinet JD Vance and all these people, they're complaining on Twitter. And it's like, bro, we are cooked, man. And I guess that's once again, the theme and the point is no one's going to do anything, right? And we're on our own, and there's no place you can run and hide from it. The tyranny and the corruption knows no bounds. It's in every speck of soil of the United States. It's on every speck of the world, right? There's no running from this. Like I said, it's just the human condition, man. From the beginning of time, there was a bully, right? A tyrant telling the other guys where to go, what to do. This is his land, and if he wanted it, it became his land and not yours. He'd kick you off it. This is your property. No, it's not. Now it becomes mine. I'm gonna keep it. Well, by force. Someone else is gonna take it from you, and that's what it's been from forever, right? Anyway, man, let me know what you guys thought about it. If you saw this video, let me know what you think about the story. Till the next one, you know what it is, man. We are on our own. Nobody's coming to save us. So get right with God, because only God can save you. Freedom fighters out.